welcome you all to Trek Wars.
Today on Trek Wars, we'll be taking a look at the Challenger class. The Challenger class was a type of vessel that was in service in Starfleet in the 24th century. It was contemporary to the Galaxy class, and its saucer and nacelles were very similar in design to that class, but roughly 2/3 of the ship's size. The Challenger class was about 390 meters in length and mainly used as an exploration and diplomatic duties. One was positioned above the saucer and the other was located below. It was only known class of Starfleet vessel that had this configuration. Another unusual aspect of the design was that the secondary hull was attached directly to the rear of the saucer. This contained the engineering section and was slightly longer than the saucer hull, but thinner. The Challenger class had similar abilities and facilities as the Galaxy class, meaning it could attain a top speed of warp 9.6 for a short period of time. It was armed with multiple phaser arrays and at least 2 photon torpedo tubes. One of these ships was seen at Wolf 359, the USS Buran NCC-57580, and was destroyed by the Borg. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at the ship and we're going to analyze what we see here. So the ship does have a crew of 300. And we know that the Enterprise has a crew of 1,000, so this ship is pretty small. But I'm going to show you a comparison right now, and you can see that yes, this ship is pretty small, but it's not that small. It's actually pretty girthy for a ship of its size, and it's going to be like that for one particular reason. Long-range exploration. And then number 2, the ship's primary function, like the number one thing the ship is doing, is it's doing diplomatic relations. That's why it has Galaxy class amenities, holodecks, all these things. It had special atmosphere to hold different types of aliens, species when it's doing its negotiations. But the main reason they made this ship is the Federation wanted to show its technological advantages to other minor races, but they don't want to be sending a Galaxy-class starship, which is basically a battle cruiser, to go do negotiations. It's like an intimidation tactic that the Federation doesn't want to be doing. So they want to build a ship that is very advanced for its size, very luxurious and nice, but doesn't come off as being a warship. And that is exactly what the Challenger class is. Now, when we look at the Challenger, it's not like the ship can't defend itself. Its overall weapons are 7,332,000. Its shields are the same as a Galaxy class. Its hull value is 596,816. It has a mass of 2,250,000. So its shield and defensive capabilities are 2,351,816. So this ship can take a heavy beating. It may not have a lot of offensive capabilities compared to some of the other starships in its line, but it's still perfectly capable of defending itself. The ship has 2 huge phaser arrays, just like the Enterprise D. And then it has several small arrays that are located in the back of the ship. So altogether, the ship has 6 phaser arrays. That's not very many for a ship of its class. Most cruisers definitely have more phaser arrays than this. But remember, it's a diplomatic ship. It's not supposed to be engaging enemies. It's not its primary function. But if it needs to fight, it can fight, and it can fight for a long time. It's got the same technology as a Galaxy class. This is a miniaturized Galaxy class. It's incredibly advanced. It's very powerful. It's using Type X phasers, and it has the only real offensive huge difference is this ship is not packing the multi-shot Galaxy class torpedo. What, the MK-80, I believe what it is. It's going to be a standard single shot Federation torpedo launcher. They're just not putting everything that the Galaxy class has, but most of its weaponry and tools are on this ship. And another thing to talk about it is the ship does have a pretty big shuttle bay. I mean, if you look at the actual shuttle bay that's attached to the top pylon, and you look at it, you can see that it's rather large, and it can actually house a lot of shuttlecrafts. And the reason for that, I don't know. I don't know why the shuttlecraft bay is so large. I mean, it's a diplomatic ship, so I guess maybe if it's going somewhere and it needs to have a lot of diplomatic relations and they're having to move a lot of people and crew, they can do it in a quick manner. But that's what I speculate. Alright, so the ship is pretty advanced, but the reality is this is a budget starship. It doesn't have everything the Galaxy has, but it has a lot of the same items that it does. Now, when it comes to actual cost, I'm not really sure. They said it's 1/3, so it's probably 1/3 the time, but that may not be correct. I do see that it's using Galaxy class parts, but they are scaled down parts. So unfortunately, yes, you're making the same parts, but then you're scaling them down. So then there's going to be a little bit of a, I don't know, contradictory nature when it comes to making parts, because you're going to have to bring everything with smaller scale, but since you already have the design specs there and ready to go, it's not going to take as much time. But I don't know, you could probably build 2 or 3 of these per every Galaxy class that's out there. But like I said, the main reason you have a ship like this is you're going to use it for exploration and then obviously diplomatic relations. Now let's talk about it. Well, what are you going to do if this ship is in combat? So that's the next scenario we're going to talk about. Alright, so now you have this ship, now we know what it is, so it's 1/3 the size of a Nebula in a Galaxy class. What if you do get into combat? What kind of scenario is that going to be? What is that going to look like? What are you going to do? Well, you can actually do quite a bit. So when you actually look at these two ships, and you look at a Galaxy class, and you look at a Challenger class, as far as the offensive capabilities, it's got half of what a Galaxy can do on paper. Now, it's obviously significantly less because it can't launch 10 torpedoes at a time. It's got single shot torpedoes. They're modern torpedoes, so they're going to hit for 171,000. That's good. So this ship is not going to engage ships on a tactical level at long range. It doesn't want to do that. This ship is going to need to get into the mid to short range because it needs to be using those Type 10 phasers, because it has 2 incredibly large phaser arrays, just like the Galaxy and just like the Nebula. That's an extremely effective weapon. And then if anything does get behind the ship, it's got 4 Type 10 phaser arrays waiting to defend the back of the ship. People think the ship has no phaser arrays behind it, and it's a big blind spot. It's not correct. It's completely wrong. The ship is far more, I guess, offensively capable than what most people think. The other thing is the shields are heavy. It's the same as the Galaxy class. Its hull is obviously much less than a Galaxy class. You know, it's about half of what a Galaxy class, because its mass is 2,250,000. So I know it says it's 1/3 the size of a Galaxy class. That's not really true. I guess as far as actual size, but as far as actual weight and mass, it's 2,250,000. The Galaxy's 4 million. So it's basically half. You know, like I said, the ship is pretty thick. So, I mean, it's going to be able to hold out pretty well in a fight. This ship is a cruiser. And the role of this ship, if it's going to be with another fleet, and you don't have a Galaxy class with you, this ship is going to act as a tank. It can take an incredible amount of damage, and it can still dish out good damage. Not great damage, but good damage. So this starship is a tank. Okay, so now we've talked about how this ship is better than what most people think. Now let's talk about the things that are not so good about this ship. Okay, the subspace diplomatic field, or the subspace warp field. So the warp bubble that this ship is generating is a very weird and unique one, because obviously it has its nacelles on the top and on the bottom of the shield, and they're not, you know, side by side. That's very strange, and I don't really understand why they decided to do that. There's no actual benefit to having it like that. If anything, it will make the warp field more unstable than it needs to be. So another thing to talk about this ship, which is very obvious, is there's no navigational deflector that's very obvious. So because there's no large navigational deflector, like we have on a Galaxy class or in a Constitution class, it's going to be in the same boat as the Miranda. The Miranda does have one, but it's internal in the ship, and it's nowhere as powerful or as effective as those other classes. So when you see a ship that doesn't have a navigational deflector that you can see, that means it has an internal navigational deflector. So it's far, far less capable when it comes to sensor abilities. Now, just so everyone understands, I'm not saying it doesn't have a navigational deflector or it's completely missing. What I'm telling you is the navigational deflector is actually located in this structure that looks like a ball, which is underneath the ship. This is where it's located. It's not as big, it's not going to be as efficient, it's not going to be as good as a Galaxy class or a Nebula. Does that mean the ship's not good for exploration? Absolutely not. It's still a state-of-the-art starship, it still has good sensory equipment, it's better than most ships in the fleet. What I'm just saying is when it comes to exploration and as far as efficiency, it has nothing on a Galaxy or a Nebula. It's going to be far behind those two in that one aspect. Now, when it comes to offensive and defensive capabilities, long range, the ship does not fit the boat. You don't want to be doing that like we discussed. Now, as far as close range though, the ship does have quite a bit of offensive capabilities. So it can do a lot, and it can hold its own for a long time. Is this ship a good design? Absolutely. The ship has a lot of things going for it that are much better than some of the other Federation cruisers we've seen that are the newer generation. The ship's got better shields, the ship's got state-of-the-art phaser arrays, and a lot of people do worry about the phaser arrays being damaged. Well, it doesn't really matter. If you're in a combat scenario and your top or bottom phaser array gets partially damaged, you can understand each phaser array coil is interconnected. So you can even have masses of parts of the ship destroyed and damaged, and the phaser array that is still not damaged is still operational. So the phaser array is extremely powerful weapon because it can stay in the fight for a long time. This ship can tank, and it can deliver a lot of firepower. And it's honestly a third the size of a Galaxy class. You get a lot for a little. Now, this ship gets a lot of hate that is not fair, and that's fine. But when it comes down to what it can do and what its stats are, in my opinion, it is one of the better cruisers the Federation had created. It does have some things that are not that great, such as obviously the navigational deflector, and then obviously it would be nice if it had an advanced torpedo module. But for a ship of its size, that's just asking a little too much. Its defensive capabilities are fantastic. Now, the reason why they're so fantastic is because it's a new generation starship. This is a state-of-the-art starship. Some of the other ships are older and they're like a merge between the two. This is what the Federation came up with when they got all the bees and whistles fixed. This is what they came up with, and this is a good ship. So as far as the warp geometry goes, I don't know if that's really going to be an issue or not. For what I understand, that you shouldn't be doing this, but none of the research I says that the ship is has any limitations. It says it can basically go to warp and operate the same as the Galaxy class. So the Federation designing this obviously figured out something with the warp dynamics that they're not limited like they used to be, because this ship behaves the same as the Galaxy class when it comes to speed, and that's very impressive for a ship of its size. So I hope you guys have enjoyed learning about the good old Challenger class, and with that being said, engage.
If you like this content, please subscribe and tell your friends. If you're a fan of Star Trek, make a comment. It makes a difference. With that being said, thank you all for watching Trek Wars.